seems like the number has stopped increasing. Hello, everybody. I am Bridgit McCafferty. I'm the Dean of the University Library at Texas A&M University, Central Texas. And with my co-host Lisa, I'm going to be presenting today about flexible work arrangements and managing remote. I'm sure this is something that everybody had some experience with over the last year. It's suddenly become a very important topic. And so we wanted to talk today a little bit about the research related to remote work, as well as our experience managing remote employees and also managing as a remote employee. And then going forward, what we're planning to do at our library relevant to flexible work arrangements. So I will turn it over to Lisa, who will start with the research.
Hi, I am Lisa Hopkins. I'm the Assistant Dean of the University Library, and I'm also Head of Tech Services. So it is an indisputable fact that trust and communication are two crucial factors in successful leadership. Most recent research reveals that both of these factors are all the more important in a remote working situation. First, let's define the remote work environment. DiMartino and Worth defined it as a flexible work arrangement whereby workers work in locations remote from their central offices. The worker has no personal contact with coworkers there, but is able to communicate with them using technology. This is also known as telecommuting, remote work, telework, work from home, alternative work location, mobile work, flexible workplace, and during the last year's pandemic, it was suddenly a necessity for many. Outcomes of trust in both direct supervisors and top leaders, deans and directors in our case, include greater focus on productive tasks, commitment to the organization, intention to remain with the organization, and compliance with the organization's strategic plan. Broken down, trust in one's direct supervisor leads to greater job satisfaction, while trust in the dean and director leads to perceived organizational support and commitment, which leads to improved overall job performance. Trust in one's supervisor has a significant impact on trust in the dean or director, for better or worse. But this impact can be ameliorated by vertical collectivism, which is team building that incorporates and acknowledges ranking distinctions. Team building and social support also encourage relational harmony and collective good, and it can help overcome social isolation and even, in some cases, procrastination. Remote working relies on information and communication technologies, and poor communication leads to poor productivity, impairment in professional relationships, and increased work stress. Communication with direct supervisors should be enhanced for remote workers, ensuring that supervisors remain fully aware of the employee's workload, well-being, and performance. Wang and Associates pointed to 4 remote work challenges that negatively impact individuals' work effectiveness and well-being. That's work-home interference, both the feeling that you're always working or too many family interruptions, ineffective communication, given that digital technology is the main option, procrastination, of course this happens in the office too, but it can be even worse at home, and loneliness. The characteristics or design of remote work that influence work effectiveness and well-being include job autonomy, which is usually a positive impact, supervisory monitoring, such as daily reports, clocking in, or even staying on camera during the workday. I wouldn't like that. They're actually mostly positive impacts because they help to cope with procrastination and concentration in core tasks. Workload, which can be positive when it's appropriate or negative if it's too much. And very importantly, social support. People with higher social support will experience less home-work conflict, less loneliness, and lower incidence of procrastination. In March 2020, I was one of 2 library workers designated as essential and was therefore given access to the building. Everyone who reported to me was working remotely, and I was on campus 2 to 3 times a week to check the mail, check the book drops, manage our curbside lending program, and take care of technology and system issues. By July, some of my staff were coming back some of the time, but we were, and we still are, still very much in a remote work situation, and with me managing remote employees from on-site. My experience very much reflects the research I have since explored, in that trust and communication were both the most difficult and the most crucial characteristics to establish to ensure my staff maintains the level of productivity that I had come to expect from them pre-pandemic. Lucky for us, I had already been a supervisor for 5 years and had established trust as we worked side by side, and it was not difficult for me to keep that trust when we were distant. I think it would be much more challenging for any team that started out remotely. I will add that we benefited from a strong wellness and morale committee that led the entire library team in weekly team building exercises, such as Motivation Monday, Trivia Tuesday, and virtual dessert happy hours, which really helped build trust and provide social support. As for communication, I established a morning ritual with everyone who worked for me, checking in using Microsoft Teams. This could be a social call, a work progress report, questions, well-being check, whatever was needed. In addition to the daily check-in, each Monday I received a list of goals for the week from each team member, and then a summary of their accomplishments and productivity at the end of the week. I met with each team member once a week on a video call, and the entire team met virtually once a week. Other department members were invited to our video calls when our work overlapped with theirs, especially as our work became flexible, almost fluid, to accommodate our situation. When workers are remote, punctuality and time spent at a desk no longer hold much meaning, as assessment and accountability pivot to be more project-based, more about getting the job done than how much time is spent doing it. There is a change in mindset as the focus becomes more about productivity and quality or quantity of work, depending on the task. The weekly accomplishment or productivity list that I received became a useful tool for assessment and accountability. I discovered quickly that to maximize efficiency, especially in the tech services department, the only way to accomplish everything was to cross-train everybody in on-site tasks to ensure an uninterrupted workflow. I am referring to tasks such as receiving, cataloging, processing books and periodicals, inventory and book repair, scanning books for e-reserves, and so on. As soon as we could, we arranged for one overlapping day when the entire team could be together. This was good for strategizing and problem solving, but also for team building and social support. Tasks and duties that are best done on site are saved for the days the team member is in the office, and tasks that require more concentration and less interruptions are saved for the days working at home. I want to also mention that while I was exploring the best ways to effectively supervise remote workers, I was also being supervised by a remote worker, and I was the middle manager on site. I often found myself having to navigate the fraught line between being the person physically present and therefore more apparently available, yet not having the ultimate authority. This was true not only within the library, but to our university colleagues. I was there with my door open, and it was hard to direct those who wandered into my office to instead call my boss. I often felt pulled in 2 different directions. On the bright side, as an on-site middle manager, I was able to serve as Bridget's eyes and ears on the ground, providing observations and urging them to reach out to her. It was best for both of us when I served more as a conduit than as an intermediary. And that leads us to Bridget's experience of managing as a remote employee.
Hey, everyone. So I'm going to pick up where Lisa left off. So in March 2020, I went fully remote with everybody else on campus. And then I didn't come back until March 2021. So I was remote for about a year, which is a difficult and tricky thing to do as a dean. I have 2 young children, and so I had to stay home and do some of the care for them, which was part of the reason I was remote. So I'm going to talk about my experience working as a dean remotely and some of the problems I faced in that role. So the problems I faced, I can break up into sort of 2 groups. One of them is soft problems, is what I'm calling them. So problems that deal with issues of connection and organizational effectiveness, organizational culture, stuff like that. And then logistical problems, so more concrete issues that made it difficult to function in more practical ways. Though the soft problems are sort of harder to define and see, they were also more pervasive and ultimately more problematic. They sort of got at the core of what it is to be a leader in a library. And I should say that I think these problems were not necessarily created by the pandemic or by remote work. I think they were smaller problems that were maybe a little more hidden in our library. And the pandemic and remote work exposed them and exacerbated them and made us realize that we had to find solutions. So I'm going to talk about these problems and the solutions that we found, because I think that they actually will be solutions that we continue to use going forward. So the soft problems, as I'm calling them, included the fact that as a manager, I was absent or removed from the day-to-day operation. So as a dean, I really try to be sort of hands-on. I try to at least keep a toe in the day-to-day operations. I have continued to be on the reference desk as a dean, which is one of the benefits of being at a small library. I can do that because I like to see what's going on down at the public service desks. But when I was remote, I couldn't do that. I also couldn't directly supervise and see what was happening in the library. And keep in mind, not only did we have the pandemic, which was a crisis, we had a natural disaster during this time in Texas. So we had the Great Texas Freeze, and our building sustained actually quite a bit of damage during that time because we lost power for a long time. So not being there to see what actually happened was very difficult. This also meant that I lacked direct connection with my staff, especially skip level staff. So I met with my direct reports every week, just like Lisa did. But then there's all these people that report to my direct reports. And usually I would see them because I'd walk down the hall and talk to them and, stop at their office and see how they're doing. Or I'd walk through the library on my way out and chat with all the employees that I saw and ask them if there are any issues or what's going on, managing by walking around, right? And I couldn't do that when I was remote. And that was very difficult for me. I also felt like I lacked authority to speak about the evolving issues related to the pandemic. So generally, I don't ask my employees to do anything I'm not able or willing to do myself. And I was helping make mask policies and distance policies that I was not going to enforce, and I wasn't going to be there to see happen, to enact. So I didn't feel like I had authority to do that in some sense. And then finally, there was a perceived lack of fairness related to distance employees. So previous to the pandemic, our professional staff had been allowed to work from home sometimes if they felt like doing that for one reason or another. But our paraprofessional, non-exempt staff, because of HR policies, weren't allowed to work from home. That was sort of outside of the library that we had to follow kind of policies. So when we all went remote and then we're coming back to campus, we needed to address making sure everybody had the same access to work from home. So some things we did to address these issues is we met more and we met more reliably. So we usually have a once-a-month staff meeting. We went to a twice-a-month staff meeting. Similarly, we have a once-a-week managers meeting scheduled, but probably in a given month, we only did about 50% of those meetings and we canceled the rest because we didn't have something to talk about or whatever the situation was. During the pandemic, we met twice a week for staff meetings and we met almost always once a week for managers. So we really kept those meetings. The reason we did that is because not being able to walk around, not being able to go down to somebody's office and see, how can we solve this problem? What are the issues that are going on with you today, et cetera, meant that we had to get that information another way. I had to get that information another way. So the staff meetings kind of fit into that. So at staff meetings, we would talk about things like what problems are we having in the library? What issues are we having? We spend more time on that kind of stuff than we usually would. And that was a way to supplement the I'm going to walk down to your office and ask you about this particular issue that might happen. And what we found with that actually is that we probably should have always been doing that in the meetings instead of, in a small library, it's easy to walk across the hall and solve a problem and you're done. But for years, we've been having on employee surveys complaints about, oh, sometimes in the library, changes will be made and I won't be a part of it and it'll impact me. Or I don't always get to be inside in the conversations when things are being decided. So by having those conversations in formal meetings when everyone was there, instead of those informal conversations we used to have, we were pulling everybody in and making sure everybody was a part of the conversation. And that was really good. Another thing we did was we went to more asynchronous communication instead of synchronous communication. So again, I like to just go to somebody's office and have a talk and see their face and great. We saw, we talk about whatever the issue is. But during the pandemic, we had to go to more emails and chat as our primary forms of communication. And at first I didn't like that, but I learned to really like it. And the reason is because before the pandemic, 20 times a day, I'd get somebody knocking on my door or calling my office, and I had to deal with it right then, no matter what I was working on, right? With an email or a chat, I can ignore it for 20 minutes, finish what I'm working on, and then move on to the next thing, the chat or the email or whatever it is. Another thing we like about this kind of communication is people who work weekends and evenings can be a part of the conversation in a way that they couldn't be before, so they can reply to the emails, et cetera, et cetera. There's a record of what we've said, so it's easy to look back at what's been decided and know exactly what we talked about. And also with asynchronous communication, I think it allows people to interact on their own terms. So some people have to think about things a little longer than others. There's different people work different ways, and that gives those people a chance to sit on an email and think about their answer instead of right away trying to come up with something. So we even did asynchronous team building, which Lisa mentioned. And I think that this was, again, really good for people who work Monday mornings and Saturday afternoons and never see each other, to get to know each other, and they never had before. And that was great. And it got our part-timers involved in wellness activities, which had never happened before. So that's wonderful. I also had to learn to trust staff on the ground to provide accurate information. So I couldn't go down and see when the pipe burst, what happened in the facility room when that happened. But I could send somebody, and I had to learn to trust what they said back about the kind of damage that happened. And then finally, we learned that we had to show more trust for lower level employees. So I noticed some questions about productivity. We learned really quickly that, so our lower level employees, when we went remote, they were really worried. They said, how are you going to know we're working? How are you going to know we're doing our jobs? Oh, we're so worried about this. And we learned that we probably hadn't conveyed to them enough that we trust them to do their jobs, that we respect them as peers, and that we know that they're going to do their jobs, and we're going to help them show us that they're doing their jobs. So we set up these checklists, and we set up expectations, and we went to thinking of work as tasks and not hours, right? So if you get your tasks done, however long that takes you, you are doing your job, and that is okay with us. And we had to treat them, we had to show them that we trusted them as much as we trusted our professionals who had always kind of thought of work that way, right? So we learned that we hadn't conveyed our trust in them enough, that was a problem, that we had always trusted them. We had always respected them as peers, but that wasn't expressed to them enough and communicated enough. And so that's something we've really been working on. And it's been a really positive change for us to show that to them. So let's talk a little bit about the concrete problems that we ran into. So we had issues with scheduling meetings. So work from home is, so scheduling meetings. We also have problems with work from home is always work, but also distracted work. Lisa mentioned this. I worked with my kids in the background for a year, and as a dean, that is not an easy trick to pull off. So I really experienced that. I experienced problems with less face time with upper management. So I used to be able to walk to the 4th floor of the building next to us and see the provost and talk to people in the president's office when I needed to. I didn't have that option anymore. Keep in mind, we had a budget cut during this time. Again, we had a natural disaster during this time. So I had to really work to make sure that the library was heard, right? We had an issue with one of our main employees who does training for circulation, was remote during this time for a long time. So that was an issue we ran into. How do you train remotely? And then accountability for employees, which I've already talked about a little bit. So scheduling meetings, we went to virtual meetings when we were all remote, and I don't think we will ever go back to many face-to-face meetings. We're gonna do like organizational culture kind of things, face-to-face potlucks and other stuff like that. But I don't think we're gonna go back to many face-to-face meetings, partly because, you don't pass around the flu if you're not all in the same room, but also mostly because we found that our part-time workers came to staff meetings if we paid them for an hour and let them do it from home, because they didn't have to truck in for an hour just to sit in a meeting. They could log in from home and they participated in the meetings, and we heard stuff that we never heard from them before. And it was a fantastic point of view, and we really like that. So we're going to keep doing virtual meetings so everybody has a chance to participate in meetings. As far as working from home is working, but also distracted working, we really asked everybody to think about how they work, not just what they do at work. So I figured out when I was working from home and my kids were home, 2 to 4, when my daughter took a nap, was when I scheduled most of my meetings, especially if I needed to be really present for them. I figured out when I needed to read contracts because I needed a lot of concentration before I read a contract and signed it. Other people figured out other things about how they work as a worker and what times of day are best for them and what they need to be able to do certain parts of their job. And I think that makes them better workers all around because they're more insightful into the actions of work and times of work and not just the work they do. As far as less face-to-face time with upper management, I just had to be very proactive and make meetings, set up meetings every 2 weeks, meeting. Hey, can I have a meeting with you? CFO, I need to meet with you. There's a budget cut. I need to make sure you know that I can't get cut in these specific places because that's going to be a real problem. So I set up a lot of meetings and was just very almost annoying because I knew I needed to get the library out there. And then training. So we figured out 2 things for training for circulation. First, our manual that we had was not good enough. It was good enough if you're being trained by somebody who's on campus. It's not good enough if the person training you is not on campus. So we really have been doing work on our training manual, adding things to it, making it better so that it works as sort of an asynchronous training guide and not just a manual with some stuff in it. So we're much more intentional in the way we do that manual. We also cross-trained everyone in circulation to be able to train somebody new in circulation. And this did 2 things. First of all, it refreshed everyone on our circulation policies when they were coming back onto campus from being remote, which was great. And then it also gave some people new responsibilities that they never had before. And we got to see them do really well at this, right? We got to see them actually fill this role. And it's really opened our eyes about people that might have really good opportunities for promotion later on that are really have skills that we didn't know they had. So that's been really great. It also means people can get trained at a much wider amount of time, right? There's a big block of time when we can bring people in trained. And then finally, accountability for employees. Like I said, we think now of tasks versus hours for work. So if you're doing your tasks, that's what matters. It's not like if you're 10 minutes late, as long as you're not on the desk, okay. If you're on the desk, it's a little different, obviously. What we found about that, though, is that people, especially our lower level employees who weren't used to that, they really found more job autonomy and confidence, and they took more ownership of their jobs and said, these are the tasks I need to get done. And even came up with some projects that we hadn't thought of. And they said, hey, if I can do this, it'll save me a lot of time later on if I do all of this now. So that was really good. They really took more ownership of their jobs. So that's how we kind of dealt with those problems. So going forward, we are going to try to continue with a hybrid remote work situation. We do think this is a little bit the new normal. We had never thought of remote work as an option for the library because it didn't seem like a good fit. We have desks to staff, we have stuff that has to happen on campus. It's not the easiest thing to wrap your head around for a library, right? But we now see it as sort of a recruitment and retention necessity. Like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to retain employees if I can't offer this. And on top of that, like I always tell my employees, I can't offer you the most money of any library, but I can give you other benefits that maybe don't cost me a lot of money, but require me to think out of the box, right? I can give you other things that will make you happy working here and make it easier for you to have a life and have a job. I can do that, right? So this is one of those. It doesn't cost me a lot of money. It costs me some money. It doesn't cost me a lot of money. And it's something that people really want and they really like. So what we're, and that's shown in recent surveys. So in May, a Harris poll was taken that was reported in USA Today. 25% of people want to come back to the office full time. 75% want to continue to be hybrid or full remote. I don't think we'll be able to provide full remote at my library. We're a small library. We have a lot to get done. But we are going to try to do hybrid, and not just hybrid for some people, for everybody. So right now we're planning on 1 to 2 days a week remote for everybody on staff. This includes, for instance, our circulation specialist who spends a lot of her time on the desk. We've, because we're really committed to this and because this is something that we think is really important, we're even working with her to figure out how she can do work from home as well for 1 to 2 days a week, right? Not the whole time. We're trying to find ways to maximize the benefits of this, flexibility, wellness, work-life balance, all of that, and minimize the drawbacks by continuing to do things like asynchronous communication, virtual meetings, tasks versus hours, et cetera, et cetera. And we're letting everybody do. So some of the positive, we don't see this just as a practical retention and recruitment tool. We see this as a positive change to work culture. It's the right thing to do, I think. I know I'm a working mom. I would leave my house at 6:45 in the morning and get home at 6 at night before as a dean. And I didn't have any time with my kids and they had to go to bed almost right when we got home. And that's not great, right? Work shouldn't be all consuming. It should be work and life, and they kind of work together. So I think that's why we're most committed to doing this going forward. If anybody has any questions for us, we're happy to answer. That's it. Thank you very much. Let's see, I'm gonna look through some of the questions in the chat and we'll see what we can answer. Yes, we did find some people actually work a lot better from home and have less interruptions than they do on campus. So that's great. So the argument I made to my administration actually when we had a conversation about, and I'm answering the question that just came in, so if you have more questions, go ahead and add them in. The argument I made to my administration was, look, I'm going to lose staff if we cannot continue to do hybrid. I actually had staff tell me, I'm going to find another job if I can't continue to work from home part of the time. And that was a fairly compelling argument from my administration. Right now, it's really hard to hire people, and they took that to heart. So I'm also lucky. I have a very open administration who kind of listens to the feedback on things. Yes, I'm very fortunate. I have a great administration. I can't speak highly enough about them. But yeah, the argument I made was, look, I'm going to lose my best people if I can't continue to do this. Like, this is just the way things are going to be now. And if we don't do it, we're going to lose people. Yes, I do think remote can be an aid for ADA. I know somebody who is in a wheelchair and has a remote job, and it's wonderful because, you know, joint pains and other things can happen, and it lets you kind of work in your own position, whatever feels comfortable. I have, anyway, I absolutely do think so. What else? What other questions do people have?
Somebody asked if we all have cameras, and we did use CARES money to purchase cameras for everybody on campus, and everybody has a laptop either borrowed or we purchase for them, so they all have cameras off campus too.
Yep, and we're actually working on trying to get everybody a laptop and going to porting stations at desks. So people keep their laptop and their computer comes with them instead of people logging on to new computers at different desks. I think it would. I think it opens, it helps a lot of different kinds of librarians. It helps people with kids. It helps people who have special disability needs. It helps people who, we're maybe an hour outside of Austin in our library where we work. And so I think it'll help us when we hire out of Austin if we can, which will open up our job market a little bit.
Somebody asked what kind of tasks the cataloging staff did remotely. We now do our cataloging when we are on site, but when we were 100% remote, we did stop ordering new books for a while. But we had our cataloging staff enhance records. We had our cataloging staff do some weeding actually, and just from the records, look at overlapping editions, older editions. I had a lot of, there's actually a lot of weeding you can do not in the stacks, and there's a lot of cataloging enhancement you can do at home. So those are the sorts of things I had catalogers do.
We're letting, so there's a question about what departments are working from home. We are giving everybody the option of working 1 to 2 days a week from home, and we're figuring that out even with circulation and public services staff. It's actually worked out quite well so far. So we're giving everybody the option of 1 to 2 days a week from home, so we haven't had an issue with different types of employees. Any other questions? I do think the keynote is starting if anybody is interested in seeing that, but we can certainly answer some more questions if you have them. All right. All right, I think we will end it. I think we'll end it for today because it doesn't seem like there's any more questions, but if anybody has another one, we can do it. And thank you for coming. So our search specialist actually helps with ILL as well, and she helps with some periodicals and some other things like that. So that's stuff that she does at home. So we're small, and we have people that do like 5 different things as a part of their job. And so that is a nice convenient thing about being small, is everybody does have plenty of things they can do. And actually, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's always things like checking links and writing copy for research guides, things like that, that the circulation specialist can do.
Our circulation specialist actually happens to be a very good writer, so that's we do. We have part-timers that we hired. We changed a little bit how we do the staffing. That's going to make us more flexible. And in our circulation person only wants to work 1 day a week from home, the main specialist. And actually, we have a staff member coming back to campus too. So we'll be really, I think, in good position for that. I'm actually very pleased here. So we planned it really well. We took a long time to plan it, and we looked at all the different angles, and we've sort of been working it out now for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. So it took a while though. You have to be committed to it and willing to work through the issues. That's one thing we found. It's like anything else. You have to want to do it and then carry through it. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody. It was nice talking with you all today. Oh, were there access issues for staff? No, all our staff had laptops. We made sure to provision all laptops for all of them. So even I think our student workers, we even provision laptops. So we're lucky we have a lot of laptops, and we took student laptops and we repurposed them for staff. So we made sure everybody had access to everything they needed. And we have a very good tech services head who knows how to do that. So We will open back in fall. We already have a provisional schedule for that with staffing and everything, so we know how things are gonna go. And our hours aren't as long as other libraries. We're a small library, we're a small school, so but we are open, later in the evening, and we'll go back to that in fall. Thank you. Our student population is FTE about 2,000, so it's really small. We're very small. We're only upper division. We don't have lower level courses. And so everybody transfers in, and our student population is heavily military affiliated. So we're right by Fort Hood, if anybody's ever heard of Fort Hood. And our population are a lot of people that have retired out of Fort Hood and other types of people like that. We'll have a couple student workers. We've had trouble hiring student workers lately, though, so we've had to convert some of our student worker lines to library assistants, which is a sort of somewhat higher kind of position that has a slightly higher hourly rate, but we were able to do that, so we were lucky. But we do have some work study students, and we'll have those again. Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I don't think we need to end the recording.